The Eskom Debt Relief Amendment Bill was passed in the National Council of Provinces yesterday. The bill was passed with 25 votes in favour and 15 against. The bill was introduced to make amendments to Eskom's 250 billion rand debt relief plan. Opposition parties voted against the amendment bill, stating that it is another bailout for a failing state-owned enterprise. Let's now hear from EFF Member of Parliament Mbali Dlamini on their views. Mbali, good morning. Thank you so much for making time for us. So why did the EFF oppose the adoption of this bill?
Good morning, Algin, and to all the viewers. The EFF firstly would like to state that we do agree that Eskom needs to be recapitalized to give it enough money to maintain its overall generation, transmission and distribution infrastructure, and to also complete their work in the deepen power plant as soon as possible to build additional capacity. However, we have a problem with the conditions that have been set in terms of the debt relief, such as one of the conditions is that the money will be loaned to Eskom over a period of 3 years. Eskom can then not engage in any other additional loan negotiations outside of the National Treasury. And how they're going to repay the money is that the value of the loan will then be turned into shares. Mm-hmm. Now, we are concerned as to who then stands to benefit from the loan repaid being transferred to shares. And we don't trust the capacity of the Minister of Public Enterprise. He has shown no interest in the resolution of fixing Eskom and the current brutal blackouts that the country is facing. They have given interventions that have not proven to be futile. They do parallel structures. So their ability to monitor whether Eskom will live up to the conditions that they're outlining is not showing that they are able to do that. And that we fear that this is another way to ensure that Eskom is privatized for use for profit maximization instead of aiding small businesses in the current load shedding that we have. Eskom currently in diesel is burning out 30 billion a year. So the debt is not going to remain stagnant. What happens to the remaining debt? If they are not able to service that, then what happens to Eskom? Then we are facing a complete collapse of the grid. We're not trusting the intervention. We are not trusting that it's in good faith. And we're not trusting that it has the interest of the public of South Africa in the center of it.
Yeah. When it comes to the interest rate, because initially when this debt relief was announced, we were told that it's going to be interest-free, but now the decision has been taken that there will be interest on the loans, and also that it is the Minister of Finance who's going to decide on that interest. Like right now, we don't know what the interest on that loan is going to be. Is that a concern for you as a Member of Parliament?
It's a very big concern. Like we had said, is that the 254 billion is not, the 254 million is not covering the entire debt that Eskom currently has. Yeah. And so then there's a growing outstanding on the outstanding debt that it won't be covering. And so then the Minister of Finance as well is stands to change after the election. So we don't know in what terms. So in terms of the handing over of the work in any government position of the state, that hasn't been futile as well. There hasn't been a consistency or continuity in how things have been working. So we don't know in what terms should they change the minister, or rather when the EFF comes into government, will totally redirect the money into other things. But the interest rate itself is not being considered. That's why we're saying that the bill in itself is not in good faith, because it stands to deepen the debt that Eskom is in. And then now the arrangement is between Eskom and National Treasury. Yeah.
And with that said as well, because if there's an interest on the loan, that means that additional cost to Eskom, which means that you and I may have to foot that bill again. The possibility of Eskom applying again to NERSA and saying that there have been some conditions that have been changed to the relief that we're getting from government, and therefore we may have to review the increase in the fees that we charge our customers for an individual kilowatt.
Absolutely. And then what also happens to the municipality debt that is currently owed to Eskom, because some municipalities have even implemented internal load shedding that is able to now service the debt that municipalities have towards Eskom. And then electricity will now start to become a privilege rather than a right to have lights to be kept on. What does it mean for small businesses as well when the prices of electricity become exuberant, that we are unable as ordinary citizens to keep up with the payments of electricity? What does it mean for people in formal settlements for electricity to be expensive? So this is to impact the ordinary citizens rather than, so that's why we are saying that the interest is not in the ordinary working class. And Aljan, we live in a country that has a big wage gap as well. So we know that the average person should earn 3,500 if they are working in industries that are not exploiting them. So what is the affordability capacity of an ordinary citizen when Eskom now is made and forced into entering into loan agreements that brings conditions that say that they must supply electricity for all citizens, considering the fact that we are not all in the same wage gap. We can't all afford electricity at the same, but we are now conditioned into moving and aiding the National Treasury's demand towards Eskom.
Yeah. To the point that you raised a bit earlier on, Mbali, as well, is COSATU issued a statement last year welcoming, of course, the bill, but then said that there are a few concerns that they have. One of those concerns is that the debt relief conditions attached, in particular the prohibition on Eskom investing in new generation capacity unless it is allowed to invest in new modern generation capacity. Its long-term sustainability remains at risk and load shedding will remain. Your take on COSATU's view around the conditions attached to the loan?
Yes, so the view remains just that Eskom should have been given money to recapitalize the power utility itself to make sure that it operates optimally as possible, and then invest money into hydrogen energy that now gives capacity to the boilers that now generates the electricity. So COSATU there, in that regard, we agree completely that the money should focus on enhancing the capacity and operational capacity of Eskom rather than focusing and conditioning it to the debt that it currently has.
Yeah.
Ours is to ensure that load shedding stops now and that load shedding comes to an end, because the brutality of load shedding has dire effects not only to the plant itself, but even to how it's servicing hospitals, clinics, and everything that needs to function and dependent. Even water supply now is even affected by the fact that Eskom is not being given the opportunity to focus on rebuilding its power stations to ensure that they are maintained to keep the lights on for South Africans.
Yeah. Considering that the money is also coming from the National Revenue Fund and the conditions around the conversion of these loans into shares, what's your understanding around this? You spoke earlier on about the privatization of Eskom. Government has continuously said that there is no intention to convert Eskom to become a private entity, but the conversion of the debt into chunks of shares, your understanding around that?
The chunks of shares are in whose interest would the shares go into. So they are finding ways for shares to go into private hands still, so that the interest of Eskom is to have profit maximization. Ultimately, at the end of the day, that's where the interest is. And that's why the EFF is concerned about the absence of the Minister of Public Enterprise when it comes to answering these questions as to in whose interest will the shares be dissolved in and distributed in. Should Eskom not be able to maintain the conditions or National Treasury to keep up with the payments that are needed for Eskom to function?
Yeah, but it says it would be converted into ordinary shares issued by Eskom to the state. So not a private individual. It goes back to the state.
The ANC government has over-politicized Eskom. We know that the ANC government has interest in converting Eskom into a private use. And that's why the deliberate demise and dysfunctionality of Eskom, as we are seeing today. Because the issue of Eskom should be engineers should come and fix the current generational issue of Eskom. However, it is being politicized ultimately. And we are warning South Africans now that they continue to vote for the ANC. Ultimately, that's the direction they want to go in, because it is unsustainable, the conditions that they are bringing Eskom to. And the only logical bailout that they will give back to the country, because these conditions are still to be amended, like you previously mentioned, by the Minister of Finance. And ultimately, it's for the shares to get to the hands of private use.
Thank you so much for your time. Mbali Dlamini is a member of Parliament for the EFF on the adoption of that Eskom debt relief amendment bill by the National Council of Provinces.